Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College at the City University of New York in Bayside, Queens. I'd like to welcome everyone to our commemoration tonight, the 84th anniversary of Kristallnacht. And to kick things off, I'd like to introduce the Queensborough Community College President, Dr. Christine Mangino.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Christine Mangino, President of Queensborough Community College. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone, especially our distinguished guest, Dr. Ruth Mandel, Professor of Cultural Anthropology at University College of London. Welcome, Dr. Mandel. Tonight's event marks the 84th anniversary of Kristallnacht, when Jewish businesses, schools, and synagogues were smashed and burned by the Nazis across Germany, Austria, and many parts of the former Czechoslovakia during an anti-Jewish riot, also known as the Night of Broken Glass. We are all painfully aware of the disturbing parallels between Kristallnacht and the current threats against synagogues and schools, as well as the alarming increase in anti-Semitic rhetoric and anti-Jewish hate crimes, which is creating fear in our communities and is leading to more distrust and violence against Jewish people. Anti-Semitism is once again becoming pervasive, and we must collectively condemn it because we know from the tragic history of the Holocaust what happens when propaganda, extremism, and xenophobia are left unchecked. This is why we commemorate Kristallnacht, and it is the purpose of the Kupferberg Holocaust Center to make connections between then and now, as well as learn from the past. The Kupferberg Holocaust Center, established 40 years ago, was one of the first research archives on the East Coast devoted to the study of the Holocaust. It invites students, survivors, and community members to learn through their hearts and minds and cultivate positive change by standing together against prejudice, racism, and stereotyping. I have had the great honor of meeting with Holocaust survivors who have bravely and generously shared their stories of pain and loss with me, along with how they found the resilience to survive such unthinkable circumstances. Their courage is further confirmation to me that Queensborough Community College's Kupferberg Holocaust Center stands for what we can do individually and collectively to speak out against anti-Semitism, champion diversity, and promote equity, diversity, and belonging for everyone on our campus and beyond. Please welcome back Dr. Laura Cohen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mangino. Our event tonight, Stones of Memory, features a keynote lecture by Dr. Ruth Mandel, Professor of Cultural Anthropology at University College London. Dr. Mandel will discuss her ethnographic research on Stolpersteine, also known as stumbling stones, which is a counter-memorial art project marking the final homes of Jewish and other victims of Nazi violence throughout Europe. Our commemoration of the 84th anniversary of Kristallnacht is happening while we are seeing a record increase in both anti-Semitic attacks against visibly Jewish people, as well as anti-Semitic rhetoric and conspiracy theories espoused by local, state, and national politicians that are creating mistrust and fear within the Jewish community. In the past few weeks, anti-Semitic comments made by Kanye West and Kyrie Irving have fueled anti-Jewish hatred on social media, while the FBI in Newark was fortunately able to respond quickly to credible threats made against synagogues in New Jersey late last week. If all this feels terrifying, and as though as we've been here before, it's because we have. Kristallnacht marked the first time that Jews were imprisoned on a mass scale solely because of their race, as dictated by the 1935 Nuremberg race laws, which defined Jews based on their blood relations. The destruction kicked off unprecedented anti-Semitic human rights violations and mass atrocities against Jewish people in Nazi-occupied Europe in the years that followed. This commemoration has two purposes. The first is to honor the memories of the individual human beings who make up the 6 million Jewish people murdered during the Holocaust. We are humbled by those who survived and so courageously share their painful memories and stories of resilience with us. The second is a call to action. It is no longer enough to say never again, because never again is now. It is also not enough that we remember. The horrors and lessons of the Holocaust are only as powerful and pressing if the message reaches as well as resonates with other communities experiencing racism, xenophobia, and discrimination, so that we can foster critical connections between what happened then and what is happening now. Our event today is underwritten by the Bobrow Memorial Fund and is co-sponsored by the Ray Walpole Institute for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity against Western Washington University, the Sam and Francis Freed Holocaust and Genocide Academy at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, the Center for the Study of Genocide and Human Rights at Rutgers University, and the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Education at St. Elizabeth University. And within the community here at the Kupferberg Holocaust Center, we express our sincerest condolences to Mr. Mark Kupferberg on the recent passing of his dear wife, Ina. Mark is chair of the QCC Fund Board, and it's his parents' names who grace our center. One final housekeeping note, please be sure to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as the chat feature has been disabled. And now, sometimes things happen very unexpectedly, and I'd like to take one moment. We're going to bring up Queensborough President Donovan Richards, who would also like to make some opening remarks.
Oh, sorry, and this is my fault, but I want to thank you, Dr. Cohen, for putting this together. I think it's such an important time to do events like this, and I want to thank you for organizing this annual Kristallnacht event and program. And we are very fortunate, obviously, to have the QAC here in Queens, based at Queensborough Community College. And if you don't know, the center teaches our students about the darkest period in modern history, the Holocaust. And it also makes connections with other instances of genocide around the world, so our young people understand their own responsibility to stand up against hate and injustice of any kind, and how fitting it is that the design of the building, which houses the KHC, give the appearance of shattered glass. And we all know that this is intentional. The word the word Kristallnacht obviously is in German means shattered glass. And on November 9th and 10th, 1938, life changed forever for our Jewish brothers and sisters in Nazi Germany. Sanctioned by the Nazi regime, Jewish stores were destroyed, synagogues were set on fire, and an estimated 30,000 Jewish men were rounded up for deportation to concentration camps. Kristallnacht is often considered the start of the Holocaust, and many of you attending this program experienced these events yourselves, or else you learned about them firsthand from your parents or guardians. We must all learn from this chapter of history that violence was not spontaneous, it was orchestrated, and it set into motion unspeakable terror and dehumanization, which eventually took the lives of 6 million innocent Jewish people. Today in New York and the United States, we are witnessing an unprecedented surge in anti-Semitic vandalism and hate crimes. And as president of the most diverse county in the nation, I find these trends to be very disturbing and unacceptable. I'm committed to standing with our Jewish brothers and sisters and to working with law enforcement to continue to address each instance of intimidation and violence. Drawing from the lessons of Kristallnacht, we must all confront anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, anti-Asian hate, and Islamophobia together whenever they occur, and proclaim in unison, never again. And I want to end because, you know, these remarks are obviously written, but as an African-American, I will say, I don't have to tell you about the words we've heard from Kyrie, from Kanye, and I want you to know that that is not representative of our community in any way, that we come from slavery ourselves. We understand the pains of bondage and death, and I want to reaffirm our commitment as an African-American male, take the title away, that we will always stand with the Jewish community against any forms of hate, no matter who it is, no matter who says it. We will continue to stand with this community to reaffirm our commitment to each and every one of you in our community. So please count on us to be allies in any fight. And I wanted to be here. I had to do a taping because I do have a civic meeting, but obviously I didn't get the taping done, so I didn't want to miss this. I wanted to make sure that I was here to just reaffirm that in the most diverse county in the country and in our city, that we stand with the Jewish community in any community that's being affronted with hate. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Queensborough President Richards. We're truly, truly grateful for you joining this evening. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Ruth Mandel. Dr. Ruth Mandel is Professor of Cultural Anthropology at University College London, where she has served as Vice Dean International, as well as taught since the 1990s. Dr. Mandel received her doctorate from the University of Chicago's Department of Anthropology. Her early work focusing on migration between Turkey, Greece, and Germany was the subject of her prize-winning book, Cosmopolitan Anxieties: Turkish Challenges to Citizenship and Belonging in Germany. Dr. Mandel's current and ongoing research, in collaboration with Dr. Rachel Lehr, addresses Holocaust memory and commemoration in Europe, focusing on Günter Demnig's Stolpersteine project. She was previously a guest professor at the Graduate Institute Geneva, University of Vienna, and the University of Minnesota, and in January 2023, she'll begin teaching at Harvard as a visiting professor. She's also the recipient of many honors. She was a Berlin Prize Fellow at the American Academy in Berlin, a Kennan Fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in DC, and has received many grants, including those from Fulbright, the German Academic Exchange Service known as the DAAD, the Economic and Social Research Council, and the Arts and Humanities Research Council, amongst others. Dr. Mandel, we're very grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Good evening, and my thanks to all of you sitting at your screens for choosing to participate in this session. I'd like to thank Professor Laura Cohen, the director of the Kupferberg Holocaust Center, for inviting me to share my work. Thanks also to Marissa Hollywood, the associate director, for all of her assistance in this. With a handful of exceptions, all of the images I'll be showing this evening are my own. But thanks are due to many people who shared their images and their ideas and help in various ways. And in particular, I would like to thank Dr. Rachel Lehr, Günter Demning, Ann Thomas, Deutsche Welle, Sander Gilman, John Sauerborn, Lucia Lopata Varkas, Emily Carmen, Howard Shatner, Saren Samet, Simon Lutgemeyer, and Dag Koperu. So, in the nearly 80 years since the end of the Second World War, there have been countless responses to the atrocities. One response to National Socialism and the Holocaust has been through art. This evening's talk is about Europe's largest decentralized Holocaust memorial, artist Günter Demning's Stolpersteine, stumbling stones, often known as a counter memorial. And I should clarify from the start that the stones actually are flush with the ground in which they're installed, and any stumbling is symbolic. You can see how they are flush with the ground in this picture. Demning's project hand stamps brass plaques with the name, date of birth, and the fate of the victims of Nazi persecution. The plaques generally are installed in front of their former homes. His aim is to return their names to their homes and communities. Demning often quotes a Jewish source that says, "A person is only forgotten when their name is forgotten." I'll be describing the many meanings of Stolpersteine for individuals and groups in various locations. The data come from long-term research with my colleague, Dr. Rachel Lehr. Rachel and I went to many dedication ceremonies, sometimes as observers, other times as participants. We learned that these stumbling stones are controversial and have been celebrated, imitated, banned, and vandalized. We interviewed countless attendees, the organizers, participants, passersby, sponsors, etc., as we were carrying out this research as ethnographers. This entailed participating and observing and focusing on the everyday aspects of the project. We've explored how the stumbling stones articulate with the local and the national narratives of the many places they're installed. One of our aims has been to examine how this particular memorial project can assist in the understanding of how Holocaust memory still resonates today. So I'd like to introduce the outline of tonight's talk. I'll begin by giving some background history of the artist and the project, and then I'll describe a bit about the process of how the stones are installed. Following this, I'll give examples of a number of different installations in different countries to show the diversity of the project. This leads to a discussion about the area that's been a focus of our research, the Nordic countries. After this, I'll touch upon music and how music is deployed as an integral part of some ceremonies and how people have personalized their installations. Finally, I discuss other counter memorials and the afterlives of these particular stones. Currently, there are nearly 100,000 stones in 29 countries. In each country, the plaque is inscribed in the local language, as seen here. A typical stone will say, "Here lived so-and-so, date and place of birth, date of deportation, and date and place of death, if known." And here we see some stones engraved in Greek, German, French, Finnish, and some other languages. Many people familiar with the project assume that they are solely for Jewish victims of Nazi Germany. They are, in fact, also intended for other victims of National Socialism, including resistors, Roma, Sinti, Jehovah's Witnesses, and LGBTQ individuals. However, the overwhelming majority of the stones are for Jews. This stone, installed in Oslo, Norway, commemorates a murdered member of the Norwegian anti-Nazi resistance. The project as we know it today began in 1996, when Günter Demning installed the first stones in Cologne and Berlin as a one-time initiative. However, it was noticed by some individuals who requested stones for their own murdered relatives. Initially a one-man operation, Demning's artwork evolved organically. For many years, he alone crafted the stones, embossed them, installed them. As the project became better known, some municipalities supported him. Eventually, the project expanded to today's team of around a dozen staff, researching countless requests from around the world and organizing nonstop installations. In addition, hundreds of volunteers support the project in various ways, through the research, contacting descendants, maintaining and polishing the stones, organizing installations, fundraising, and more. Until the pandemic, Demning maintained a rigorous travel schedule, on the road installing stones close to 300 days a year. One stone costs only about $130. They're paid for by individual sponsors, groups, municipalities, nonprofit organizations, and even national reparation funds in some cases. Above all, Demning is a conceptual artist. En route to an installation with him, one of our companions asked Demning if he, quote, still had a chance to make his own art these days. Demning was taken aback. He replied, "This is the art. It is my Lebenswerk, my life work, and everything that happens after I leave the stone is also art." Günter Demning grew up in post-war West Germany, the son of a German soldier who told him little about his experiences fighting in Nazi Germany, in the Nazi army, rather. Typical of his generation, coming of age in the 1960s, Günter was very engaged politically. He studied art and was heavily influenced by Joseph Beuys. Beuys was known for the conceptual art form he coined social sculpture, a way of thinking about art's potential to transform society. To Beuys and his followers, art is inherently political. Demning is open about his heritage. He identifies his own work as a response to his personal legacy. Stolpersteine installations are planned far in advance. The Stolpersteine may be commissioned by individuals, such as descendants, grassroots neighborhood organizations, schools, churches, or municipalities, and even state sponsorship. The waiting list can be about 2 years or even more. Sponsors are required to provide documentation about the individuals, where they live, before a stone can be ordered. Sponsors are encouraged to reach out to identify if there are any other descendants in order to inform them about the plans. Often, municipalities, in Germany in particular, provide assistance in the research. Günter feels it is important to meet the sponsors of the stones. Equally, many of the descendants and volunteers who have spent countless hours organizing the installations and ceremonies cherish the opportunity to meet the artist himself. Demning's motto is "One person, one stone." To him, this means that each individual death is acknowledged. These micro memorials contrast to large, often abstract Holocaust memorials that commemorate the 6 million. The individual nature of each Stolperstein opens a window into a specific life. Stolpersteine deliberately are not mass-produced. These days, they are individually embossed one by Demning's colleague, Michel Friedrich Friedlander, in Berlin. Demning made a decision not to expand production despite the growing demand. Instead, by creating each unique plaque one at a time, he recognizes the individual's identities and their murders, and hence renders them unforgettable. A personal engagement with ordinary, until now nameless individuals recognizes a life lived and a life taken away. Demning insists that direct attention is paid to each individual through the slow artisanal creation of each brass plate. Demning says that the stumbling stones represent the antithesis to the mechanization of Nazi mass murder that denied individuals not only their lives, but their names. When he installs the individual stone, he engages with it, carefully and methodically polishing it in a reverential posture. The best way to take in the details of the stone, is to approach it closely and lean over toward it. This creates an intimate space between the viewer and the stone. Part of what is special about them is that they are explicitly personal and individual, while at the same time implicitly connected to the network of scores of thousands of similar stones throughout Europe. The Stolpersteine project is the world's largest decentralized memorial. This project is both small and expansive, international and intimate, symbolic and literal. Demning chose the epithet Stolperstein, stumbling stone, as a reference to the random nature of encountering them. They're meant to be symbolically stumbled across and over. Additionally, it bears the implication of obstruction, such as stumbling block in English. Demning has stated that the intention is for pedestrians to stumble with their hearts and minds. To Demning, his artwork will never be completed. He recognizes that it is not possible to place stones for all victims. He's attentive to kinship, and he thoughtfully places the stones in familial arrangements. The stones for children are placed between parents. As he has told us, now the parents can protect their child as if holding their hands. He often arranges familial generations in horizontal rows. Moreover, the process of installation is iterative for Demning. He revisits many locations annually and some more frequently to add stones, thereby ensuring a continuity of both attention and engagement. In many instances, the sponsors plan a dedication ceremony to accompany the installation. At the sites we have visited, we observed a wide variety of dedications. Some had music, flowers, photographs, speeches, prayers. All of them included biographies read out. These familiar memory performances and gestures might be seen as conventional, but we also observed less familiar practices and novel rituals. At one installation in Berlin, attended by around 30 people, we noted the thought that had gone into a quite elaborate dedication that included music, candles, photographs, singing, song sheets, and speeches. The biography of the family's lives included musical selections. In fact, all those gathered were led in a 3-part round of the song Zum Gali Gali, an Israeli folk song celebrating pioneering and working the land. We were told that this song was chosen specifically because one of the victims had been part of a pre-war socialist Zionist youth group. This tune was striking and a surprising choice. It reflected the amount of nuanced research that had gone into the ceremony's preparation. The aftermath of the Holocaust dispersed survivors far and wide, severing family ties. Sometimes survivors had no knowledge whether family members and friends had survived. Stolpersteine have proven to be one of the ways distant relatives connect. At numerous installations, we met people who were meeting their cousins for the first time that day in that place where they shared a relative who had been murdered. This is one of the ways that Stolpersteine inadvertently reunite families. Another installation in Berlin actually was a reinstallation in front of the former pharmacy owned by Adolf Mochrauer, seen here in the framed picture. Mochrauer had been hounded out of Berlin by Nazis who took over and Aryanized his pharmacy. He fled to South America, where he took his own life. The original Stolpersteine for him had been vandalized by neo-Nazis the year before, along with a number of others nearby stones. Günther Demning is adamant about replacing any vandalized stones. This particular reinstallation took the form of a political rally. As the crowd gathered, anti-fascist banners were unfurled. Political figures, among them the local mayor, high-profile national politicians, along with international, national, and local media were present. In addition to commemorating a local persecuted Jew, many in the crowd clearly were attracted to the event in order to express solidarity against the growing neo-Nazi movement. On May 30th of this year, in London, England, Great Britain joined the rest of Europe in becoming a site of a Stolpersteine, this one for Ada von Danzig. Ada was a young Dutch woman working in a paintings conservation studio in central London. Upon learning that her family's situation was worsening, in the late 1930s, she returned to the Netherlands and tried to help them escape. Instead, the family was arrested, deported, and killed in Auschwitz. Although she was not deported directly from London, Günther decided that her exceptional situation warranted a stone. 2 days following the London installation, the Republic of Ireland became the 29th country with Stolpersteine. The 6 stones shown here commemorate Irish citizens and residents caught up in Europe and unable to escape. 5 of them were killed in Auschwitz and the 6th in Lithuania. These stones in Ireland and England are the first in these countries, but may not be the last. As I mentioned at the beginning, much of our research has focused on the Stolpersteine project in Nordic countries, specifically Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. Similar to many other places where Jews settled, settled in these lands, many Jews began as itinerant peddlers. The most successful among them owned dry goods shops, known in Norway, for example, as Judebutik, Jew shop. Though Denmark and Norway were both occupied by Nazi Germany in 1940, their experiences of occupation sharply contrasted. For its part, Finland fought alongside Nazi Germany until 1944. While the impact of the war on Jewish citizens differed in these countries, the fates of asylum-seeking Jewish refugees proved similar. We attended the first ever Stolpersteine installations in Sweden in 2019, where 3 stones were dedicated, including the one you see here. These stones mark an important reckoning with Swedish complicity and are controversial precisely for that reason. The first dedication, attended by numerous international dignitaries, was for Erik Holua, a stateless refugee who had been born in Berlin in 1896, fled to Sweden in 1938, only to be deported and killed in 1942. Sweden's Jewish population, numbering somewhere around 10,000 before the war, was the largest in the region, composed of Jewish Swedes along with several thousand refugees, such as Holova. Though Sweden claimed to be neutral in the war, numerous Jewish residents, all stateless refugees, were deported and killed. Post-war scholars have delved into Sweden's putative neutrality and have shown the many ways that Sweden accommodated the Nazi regime. When the Nazis demanded that the Finnish army turn over its Jewish soldiers to them, the Finnish general Carl Gustaf Mannerheim refused, protecting them as fellow Finnish soldiers. However, the Nazis withheld critical grain shipments to Finland until Eastern European refugee Jews were relinquished. Thus far, 8 refugees have been identified who were deported to death camps, murdered in the country's swap for grain. 4 of them are memorialized in Stolpersteine, and this image is of 3 of them in Helsinki. The stone in the center memorializes a 2-year-old child, the parents on either side. Most of the more than 2,000 Jews in Norway resided in Oslo and Trondheim. Restrictions on their mobility, education, employment, and economy led to mass arrests, loss of citizenship, and deportations in 1942. Homegrown Norwegian Nazi party members carried out the logistics of the deportation. Those who did not escape or hide were deported by ship to Stettin and then taken to Auschwitz. This clandestinely taken photograph is of the Nazi Donau ship departing the Oslo quay. Over 500 Jews were deported on this ship on the Donau. Of the 761 total deportees, about 30% of the Jewish population of Norway, only 38 survived and fewer returned. Norway's Stolpersteine, or Snublestein, are organized by the local Jewish museums. These museums are part of a larger reparations package from the late 1990s. The Oslo Jewish Museum's Stolpersteine project was completed in September 2022. Pictured here at the very same location of the Donau shown on the previous slide is Norway's Crown Princess Mette-Marit with Demning and the director of Oslo's Jewish Museum witnessing the installation of the final 3 stones. The Norwegian Center for Holocaust and Minority Studies will be organizing the installation of more stones to memorialize Roma and Sinti from Norway who were disenfranchised and murdered. Denmark's Jewish story took a different path. Its first Jewish community was established in the 17th century. Close to 8,000 Jews were living there in 1939, including many stateless refugees. Denmark capitulated peacefully to the Nazis in 1940. In 1943, the year following Norway's deportation of its Jewish citizens, Danish Jews learned a Nazi roundup was imminent. Fully 90% of Denmark's Jewish population escaped to nearby Sweden in a massive flotilla, crossing the choppy Öresund Strait between the 2 countries. Still, nearly 500 Jews were captured and deported to Czechoslovakia, to the Theresienstadt concentration camp, also known as the Terezin Ghetto. 53 of them died. As opposed to Norway, deported Danish Jews retained their citizenship. Moreover, while imprisoned in Theresienstadt, the Danish government monitored them and lobbied for their well-being. 2019 marked the inauguration of Stolpersteine in Denmark, when 12 were dedicated. Since then, dozens more have been installed. Different from some other places where stones are laid only for those who were murdered, Danish Stolpersteine committees have elected to place stones for people who were liberated, in addition to those who were murdered. The final word on these 3 stones, befriet, signifies the individual was liberated. Henny Fürst, whose name appears on the middle stone, was one of the very few surviving babies to be born in Theresienstadt. Henny, now 78 years old, was joined by her daughters and grandchildren in August 2022 at the installation of these stones for herself and her parents. One of the things we observed in countless installations has been the presence of music. We heard klezmer in Berlin, Ladino lullabies in Greece, sea shanties in Norway, and a wide range of other tunes. The inaugural Stolpersteine installation in Copenhagen, Denmark, was attended by several hundred members of the Danish Jewish community, as well as local and foreign dignitaries. A violinist was accompanied by a singer. They performed Rozenkes mit Mandeln, raisins and almonds. This is a beloved Yiddish lullaby popularized through an arrangement by Abraham Goldfaden as part of his opera Shalamis in 1880. The hundreds of people gathered watched Demnig dig into the pavement and placed 3 stones, after which the music was performed. Attendees spontaneously sang or hummed along, many weeping openly, deeply moved by the familiar music from their childhood. This Yiddish lullaby tells of a snow-white kid, goat, under the cradle that will be traded at market for raisins and almonds. When we interviewed the singer, a cantor, he explained, "I could have chosen a Holocaust song or a ghetto song, but I selected this lullaby for the grandmothers being memorialized." By contrast, in a small town in Western Norway, musicians performed the theme to Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List by John Williams. When we spoke to the violinist, he was proud of having made this selection. A few days later, at the inaugural installation in Stockholm, Sweden, we heard the Schindler theme once again. Ever since the widespread dissemination and popularity of the film Schindler's List, some scholars have wondered about the film's legacy. Most agreed that it would preserve the memory of the Holocaust. However, some wondered if it would restrict and mold memory in problematic ways. Over the past couple decades, Schindler's List has indeed become inextricably linked with the Holocaust in popular culture. It often serves as a shorthand via Hollywood for the atrocity. Whereas many installations included planned musical performances, in this town in northern Hungary, we observed spontaneous singing by a group of descendants, having come from 3 different countries and continents for the event. Their reunion was amplified through their voices. They broke into a well-known anthem of Jewish persistence through adversity, Am Yisrael Hai, at the end of the ceremony, reinforcing this defiant sentiment in song. They followed this song with 2 others from Jewish liturgy. Indeed, despite the atrocities their relatives experienced, the family lives on, 3 generations from 3 continents witnessing together that day. When the group shared a l'chaim, the traditional Jewish toast to life, they were reaffirming both the present and future while defying the past attempt to annihilate them. At the well-attended dedication in Dublin, Ireland, the 6 stones were placed in front of a primary school, once attended by local Jewish children. This part of the school's history is incorporated in its curriculum. Many of the day's events involved the school children. The violin teacher led her students in a medley, 6 songs of the Holocaust based on Unter deine weiße Stern, Under Your White Stars. The composer Brodno and the poet Sutskever collaborated on this piece while they were trapped together in the Vilna ghetto. Sutskever escaped and went on to become an acclaimed Yiddish poet. Brodno was murdered in the Estonian concentration camp Kluga. The power of music to evoke painful and cherished memories was brought to the fore in all these dedications. For Demnig, Stolpersteine are about the symbolic returning of the murdered to their residence. By preserving their names, their memories are restored. By contrast, for the descendants, it's about remembering specific relatives and for creating a place to mark and express their individual grief. Occasionally, people wish to expand or personalize the stones they sponsor, such as placing small tokens, stars of David, or notes beneath the stones. Californian Howard Shatner, the descendant of Nazi victims, chose to personalize the dedication for the Berlin Stolpersteine he commissioned. He cut and embossed these copper hearts with the transliterated Hebrew word for life, chaim, to be buried under the stones. So what happens after the stones are installed? People continue to interact with them. As far as Gunther is concerned, the art continues after the stone is installed. It takes on a life of its own as individuals and groups interact with it, engage with it. Some towns and cities maintain active websites where people can report damage and vandalism. Many towns and neighborhoods have developed apps for self-guided tours to learn more about the individuals behind the names on the stones. School students sometimes make rubbings and incorporate the stones as part of their Holocaust curriculum. In many sites, local groups and neighbors commit to monitoring the stones. In some places, Friends of Stolpersteine groups polish them on special days, such as Kristallnacht, Yom HaShoah, and other meaningful times. One person told us, "I feel as though I have a personal relationship with these dead. I see them and remember them every time I pass by. I nod to them, acknowledge them. I know each individual's history. I think about the books that didn't get written, the music that was not composed, the families whose lines were cut short." In the Polish city of Breslau, a group of school children at the Shalom Aleichem Jewish Elementary School had hoped to install Stolpersteine. They wanted to memorialize Paul Ehrlich, the architect and former resident of the building that housed their school. Ehrlich and his family were murdered at Theresienstadt. Due to the timing constraints and long wait for the actual stones, instead, they devised their own solution. They painted gold on the flagstones in front of the school to imitate Stolpersteine. This choice of memorial points to the power of Stolpersteine in the public imagination. Stolpersteine are not the only Holocaust memorial that can be randomly encountered, found in unexpected places. Such counter memorials can be found throughout Europe and beyond. A well-known installation is in Budapest. This memorial of bronze shoes scattered along the bank of the Danube memorializes the Jews who were forced to remove their shoes prior to being murdered and pushed into the river in the winter of 1944 and 45. These keys recall the homes Viennese Jews who lived on this street lived in before they were killed. A tag with the name of a murdered resident hangs from each key. And it was one of the local residents who did all of the research for this and was determined to get the whole neighborhood involved, which he did quite successfully. This stone suitcase is permanently situated in a sidewalk in the town of Leiden in the Netherlands. This and 5 other similar suitcases are located in meaningful spots, such as the police station where Jews were rounded up, houses where Jews hid, and in front of a Jewish orphanage. Like Stumbling Stones, this installation the keys, and the shoes are intended to be encountered unexpectedly. This subtle memorial is hidden in plain sight. On the wall to the right of this large entry of a Berlin apartment building is the set of doorbells, each with a name and buzzer connected to the apartment. On the left is its mirror image, another set of doorbells, but these are silent. One resident in the building, an architect, undertook extensive research into the building's 83 pre-war Jewish residents. He had a nameplate for each individual and family engraved and created this silent bellboard of polished brass. In lieu of a voice box for the intercom system, a memory plaque listing the concentration camps in which the absent residents were killed, and is followed by a Hebrew inscription where it says in Hebrew, "May they rest in peace." Memorials such as these provoke a range of responses, including surprise and confusion, awe, and grief. This image was captured on a Kristallnacht in Germany. You can see that it has been polished and is being memorialized with candles and flowers. And today, on this anniversary of Kristallnacht, in addition to other commemorations, people all over Europe are polishing the stones and placing memorial candles, visiting the trail of Stolpersteine in their cities and towns, reminding their neighbors of the consequences of intolerance, racism, and anti-Semitism. In Germany, the day is more commonly known as Reichspogromnacht, or the November pogrom. Some in Germany have argued that calling it the Night of the Broken Glass, or Kristallnacht, minimizes the extent of the violence and does not acknowledge those who were killed and the 30,000 arrested and put in concentration camps. They claim that Kristallnacht makes it sound like a spontaneous event, when some windows and storefronts and synagogues might have been shattered, rather than it being the state-organized pogrom it actually was, that signaled a fundamental escalation of the persecution of Jews and the Holocaust to follow. So, to wrap up, this talk has looked at the variety of installations, attitudes, and responses to this exceptional project. I've tried to address what the Stolpersteine project tells us about marking particular days and places of terror, while at the same time remembering the singular individuals amidst the murdered multitudes. As we have just seen, Günter Demning's Stolpersteine project is just one of many art initiatives that attempt to address mass atrocities of the Holocaust. One way to understand the Stolpersteine, as well as some of these other projects, is as counter memorials. A counter memorial can be thought of as a political form of art that is, by definition, participatory. People encounter them and must choose how to respond or not. Stolpersteine are non-prescriptive. People bring and take away a plethora of emotions, ideas, and memories. The scholar James Young reminds us that counter memorials remain a process, not an answer, a place that provides time for memorial reflection, contemplation, and learning. Perhaps this is why they're so well received, why increasing numbers of individuals, towns, and countries seek to join the project. What started as a single event in Germany in 1996 has grown exponentially to become the world's largest counter memorial. As countries re-examine their problematic histories, some join the Stolpersteine project. Becoming part of this international memorial facilitates a shift in public national narratives about the past, responsibility, and complicity. For example, we were told about a small town in northern Norway that was eager to join in. They wanted their own Stolpersteine. So they contacted the Jewish Museum in Oslo, asking for their own stone. When informed that no one had been deported from their town and murdered, they expressed their disappointment. No Jews had been deported from their town since no Jew had ever lived there. By contrast, Poland, where millions of Jews had lived and were murdered, has largely, but not completely, blocked efforts for the Stolpersteine to be installed. Other localities, groups, and individuals object to Stolpersteine, and for a variety of reasons. Some fear their placement will reduce their property values. Others do not like to see the reminder of their national shame. Within the Jewish community, there's objections as well. Leaders in some communities have barred them, claiming it would be a desecration to step on the names of the murdered. Some of the objections stem from a comparison of the stumbling stones to matzevos, gravestones. However, the artist Demning reminds us that the stones deliberately are placed in front of homes where people lived, not where they died. Still, this is not necessarily the most salient aspect for descendants, many of whom see them as places of memory, like a gravestone. Some see it serving as a symbolic gravestone, a place to come and remember their lost ones. For Demning, the Stolpersteine in the aggregate and the singular comprise a work of art that can never be complete. Still, many relatives express a deep sense of closure once the stone has been laid. A descendant expressed it like this. He said, "I feel a burden has been lifted. Now there is a place with their name to remember them." And with that, I will finish, and thank you for your attention and interest.
Dr. Mandel, I remember when we spoke about this initially, memorials is a passion of mine, and to hear you talk so eloquently about this and to talk about so many of the different issues, not the least of which is when we talk about the Holocaust, we're often talking about millions of people at once, and it is so hard to think about what individuals are. And I really love how you're talking about this layering of memories, the hyperlocality of memory versus national memory. And you brought up right at the end, and I just have a few questions about controversies. Could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges, particularly in Munich? I know that the city was very much against it. I know that there's one or two that I found there, but I think they had a pretty strong reaction against installing them.
It's very, very complicated. Just last week, I read a master's thesis that focused exclusively on the Munich situation. Basically, the head of the community, Charlotte Knobloch, was a child survivor, and she was very, very wealthy and really dominated the Jewish community, and was able to politically get the municipality to do whatever she wanted. And she personally objected to them and has some very strong statements about how stepping on them would be just like Nazis stepping on Jewish bodies and heads. And she's been very dramatic about it. But in opposition to her position, there's a very dynamic, active group in Munich called Stolpersteine for Munich. And they have commissioned thousands of stones, and they've managed to put in, I don't know, a couple of dozen, but only in private property. So the municipality still does not allow them in public property, but they are now being warehoused in storage in Munich for that day that it hopefully will be possible, hopefully for this group. So we could talk about that for hours, but I think that's probably enough.
A dear friend of mine who's German and lives in Munich, his mom and his sister actually take care of certain stones, and they're part of the family in a way. I think we were talking a little bit about this. And again, sort of going back to this idea of hyperlocality versus national memory, this is sort of in plain sight. And you talked a lot about the counter memorials being so powerful. And again, sort of the way that these kinds of memorials commemorate the everyday. and where people lived. And I think that that's also really important, since so much of Holocaust memory, even at our center now, we have an exhibition focusing on the concentration camps. We're focusing on how people were deported and killed. And I think that what's really significant about seeing where people lived is really remembering their lives. I wanted to ask you a little bit, because going back to this idea of in plain sight, in this country, we have lots of areas of atrocity and people who have suffered, Native Americans, Black people, people who were enslaved, and memories of locations and names and things that we don't really ever talk about. And could you talk a little bit about how this project has spread to other initiatives? Did we talk about that in our conversation?
Interestingly, in New England, there are two projects that were started as that were directly influenced by the leaders, the founders of these projects, having seen Stolpersteine in Germany. And they got Günther's blessing to be able to carry it out. And one is in Vermont and one is in Connecticut. One is called Witness Stones and the other is called Stopping Stones. And they put in very similar looking plaques in the ground in front of places where formerly enslaved people lived and worked. And the one in Connecticut is extremely active and for the most part works with schools and gets school children involved to carry out the research and do it. It's a wonderful pedagogical technique. Another one that was directly influenced by it is called Last Address, Последний Adres in Russian. And again, it was actually a Ukrainian political scientist journalist who saw them in Berlin and said, oh, I want to do something like this in the former Soviet Union. And they're small, about this large metal plaques that are put on the sides of buildings, because there it's not a problem. And there's a square hole cut out in it where the photograph would be, and it's meant to replicate a Soviet era identification card minus the photograph. And the writing is, again, the name and the fate of the person who was taken to Gulag and killed. And so that is now being done in conjunction with the group in Moscow Memorial. That is, Putin does not like them, and they were just winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. So it's had all kinds of influences in many, many places.
And I think that's fascinating, especially, when we in this country often think of monuments as these static markers of history, that everything's been decided. We don't necessarily think about who's on the horse or if it's the same person, it's a mold. And somehow tearing them down can be an affront to some people, but also cathartic to lots of other different communities. So I'm just kind of looking at some of the questions. And one of the things that's come up just on a practical level, there are some people who've acknowledged that they have family members who have stones. For people who are wanting to potentially place a stone for a family member, you spoke a lot about different communities in different countries that are in charge of this. Is that where they should go, or is that the path?
No, yes and no. The Stolpersteine organization, it's a foundation actually, controls all of them except for the ones in the Netherlands. There's a spin-off group, because there were so many in the Netherlands, that now if you want to put a stone in for somebody in the Netherlands, you go directly to that group and they will take care of it. For every other place, it's through the official organization. And I asked Marissa to post the website of the organization. I don't know if she's done that. And it's a very straightforward process, and it's in English and in German on the website, and it takes you through all of the steps that are necessary, and they help with it. And so I will say, though, in Poland, it's not impossible, but almost impossible. There have been lots and lots of objections there, or obstacles, I should say.
That's a very complicated place right now. I think
It is indeed.
That is a government that is very invested right now in distortion. They have a lot of resources, national resources, and the battle over national memory there regarding the Holocaust and suffering is very significant. In terms of just raising, I guess I'll close with this, in terms of raising awareness about the stones in the United States for many Jewish community members, but also people who have family members who survived the Holocaust or perished in the Holocaust. Are there other ways people can find more about this? For example, with other Holocaust museums or human rights museums in the United States?
Not that I'm aware of. I think it really, I mean, a lot of individuals in the US happen to know about it because they've seen them or they know about them or they have direct family members who are memorialized in the stones. But as far as I know, there isn't any one, there's no US chapter of it or anything like that.
I want to thank you so much. I feel really strongly that the way we can teach about the Holocaust is to personalize and to really talk about this as a huge tragedy and horror that people have experienced, not large groups of people. I mean, we know all of the numbers, but again, when we start to think about, if I walk out my front door and something happens, that's significant. And I think I think that we're at a moment in our society where things are becoming personal. And it's also a way for us to build community. So thank you so much for your talk and for your patience. I also wanted to thank Queensborough Community College's president, Dr. Kristine Mangino, and Queensborough President Donovan Richards for their remarks today. Thank you to all of you who have joined in, and we're very, very grateful. We hope everyone stays safe and be well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.